Hello and welcome to the HTech Web Development Bootcamp. This is our first week, and this week we'll be looking at the web development fundamentals. Now, there's a question that says, why do I want to learn to code? Of course, there are many reasons to learn to code, but you need to figure out why and what you want to do with these skills. Now, there are people who work for companies as developers. Now, these people, they've learned how to code and they're still learning as they're working in the company. So it gives us an idea that you can learn to code and get yourself a job as a developer to work for a company. Now, we have people who run their own businesses. They are called freelancers. So many people, they freelance, they get their job, they become boss of their own by knowing this programming thing and knowing how to code and just get jobs and freelance. So that was one other reason for we learning to code. Another one is building your own products or building your software so as to provide service to others. That's software as a service. So as a developer, when you know coding, you can have your own products which you can put on the internet to provide service to others or services to others. Now the fourth one here is creating educational content. There are developers who use this skill to educate. Like if you go on YouTube, you see different programming videos. Those are developers that use your skill in education. You also see them in Udemy, Skillshare, Coursera, and the rest. So using this skill to create educational content is one thing you can also look into by learning how to code. And the fifth one I will look here is coding as a hobby. There are people whose hobby is just to code, so they have this skill but they just do it like a passion within themselves. But actually you can convert your hobby into making money or into education or into building up products or software as a service or even freelancing for yourself or creating a business. Now I want to look at the types of developers. We have majorly three types of developers. The first one or the first set, they are called the front-end developers. And these developers, they work on the client side, also known as a browser, and they create user interfaces for users to interact with. So they use tools like HTML, hypertext markup language, CSS, cascading style sheets for styling the web page, and also JavaScript for programming the web page. They use things like the document object model, which is known as the DOM, and other frameworks for the front end like Bootstrap 5, Tailwind CSS, and the likes. So they develop the interface you see when you go to a website. There are developers that do such. The second set of developers are known as the back-end developers. Now these back-end developers, they work on the server and they also deal with databases. They use languages like PHP, C Sharp, Python, and even JavaScript, which we know as to be a front-end language. Now JavaScript is robust and can be used in the backend also. Now these backend developers, they also work with databases like MySQL, Postgre, MongoDB, etc. They use tools like the HTTP, which is known as the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. They do server configuration, they deploy web pages and web apps to the internet. So those are the functions of the backend developers, and people learn coding just to become a backend developers. But these days we have people who combine both the backend work and the front end work. They are known as the full stack developers. They work on both the client side and the server side. They use tools which the front-end developers use for the client side, and also they combine the tools which the back-end developers use for the server side. So they are known as the full stack developers. Now these days the line that separates the front-end developers and the back-end developers is getting more slimmer and slimmer by the day, because many people tend to toe the lane of becoming a full stack developers. Now we want to also look at the necessary tools that every developer uses. Number one tool, the very first tool is a computer and an operating system. So every developer must get a computer. Now computer from the last 10 years is okay just to learn web development. For at least the computer should have a minimum of 4 gig RAM, a minimum of 192 or 196 hard drive space, 500 gigabyte space. So just a computer with an OS installed in it and you are set to go. You can get a Mac computer or Windows computer or even a Linux computer. Now Mac and Windows are the common computers you can find in any store you go to. You can also have Windows subsystem for Linux, but most persons are not familiar with it. So just get a computer and get an operating system installed in it and you're set to go. Now you need a web browser, and one of the most popular web browser we know is the Google Chrome. So Chrome is one web browser that every developer uses. In fact, it has what they call a Chrome developer tools that enables or help developers when they code and make websites. We also have Firefox, Mozilla Firefox. It's also a good browser for web development, and we have Brave also, and Safari, which is found in Mac OS. Now you need a place to write your codes, and that is why we have text editors or IDE, integrated development environment. Now one of the most popular and common IDE or text editor we use in web development is known as the Visual Studio Code, which is VS Code. It is underlined here because it is popular, it is robust, it has so many extensions, and many developers use it. We also have what they call Sublime Text. Sublime Text 2 is good. Actually, choosing a text editor is your own choice and your own preference, but I would just suggest my own recommendation is just VS Code here. We have Vim also is nice, and we have WebStorm 2 is good. Now as a beginner learning web development, now learning the terminal is not actually the first thing on the priority or the priority list now, but it is good for you to know about the terminal. There's this terminal that comes with the Windows system. It's a default terminal known as a CMD or the command prompt. So as developers, it's good you have an eye to learn the commands in the CMD or in the terminal. We also have Item 2, which comes with Mac, and then PowerShell also comes with the Windows. Now we have the Git Bash. Git is used to work with what we call GitHub. So GitHub is a repository where you can do collaborative work with other developers. You can check the progress of your work, so your files, your web files you are developing can be uploaded to GitHub, and then you use Git Bash to push it there to get it and the rest, to update and the rest. So Git Bash is also needed to to learn. That's why I underlined it here. We also have Hyper 2 is nice. Now a developer should have an eye for design, at least should know how to work with colors, with images, with constraints, with fonts, the typography and the rest. So there are design softwares that helps when one is going into software or website development. Now we have Figma. Figma is a web-based tool that runs on the browser and is very useful. Although we also have the Windows version of it, the Windows app of it, and then Figma is robust and is wide. We also have Adobe XD. Adobe XD 2 is nice. It's not web-based. It has a software. So learning to work with this, you'll be able to create prototypes, wireframes, user interfaces that your clients can see, and then even before you start coding, so to ease the stress of coding, you already have a prototype and a design for your client if you are to freelance. We have Sketch. Sketch comes with Mac. We have Canva. Canva also is similar to Figma, but Canva is a web-based app, and also Canva runs on mobile. We have the Canva Android app, and that's tool is very necessary. It's good tool to know how to use Canva for design. Now Photoshop, many developers have been using Photoshop in time past, but Photoshop is geared towards photo editing and not towards prototyping or wireframing like other tools like Figma do. So Photoshop is a nice one for photo editing and the rest. Now I want to look at some fundamental building blocks of the web page, and the two fundamental building blocks out of three is the HTML and CSS. HTML and CSS are the building blocks of the web page or web development. Now as a developer, you are going to learn HTML5. That's the first step. You learn the basics of HTML5, and learn the semantic stack. You learn how to lay out pages using the HTML elements, and then you move towards CSS. You learn the fundamentals of CSS, colors, fonts, you have paddings, margins, box layout, and the rest. Then you learn the alignments, how to align your layout using flexbox and grid. After that, you then learn how to make your website responsive, because not only your device will be used to access your web page. People will use phones with smaller screens, people will use devices with wider screens, so you must build the web page in a way that it is responsive to every screen width. That's media queries. You learn about media queries, and then it's good you learn about simple animations, how to do simple animations. When you click a button, it will just grow with a little transition and the rest. So you learn that with CSS. And there are also some extra tools, although as a beginner in web development you might not need to focus on them now, but there are extra tools that you can see, you can view, and you can learn later as you move on in this web development bootcamp. One is Sass. Sass is a CSS preprocessor that adds to the functionality of CSS. It offers things like variables, nesting, mixins, functions, etc. Now, CSS is not a programming language, so there is no logic in CSS. There is no variable in CSS like a variable you have in other programming languages like Java, C, and then C# or Python. But Sass enables you to write your code or your CSS styling sheets like a programming language. Now, although I said there is no variables like other variables in other programming languages, but CSS do have variables, but it's not like the way you declare a variable. Maybe you say int b, int a equals to this. No, it's not like that way. CSS variables take a different shape, but Sass helps you to do functions in your CSS. To use Sass, you will need to get a Sass compiler in order to compile your Sass code to a native CSS code. We also have what they call Post CSS. It's a tool for transforming CSS with JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is a programming language, so you could use JavaScript to transform your CSS, and to do this you need to install plugins that will add to the stuff Sass offers and more. One other thing is Content Delivery Network. As a beginner in website development, it's good you learn about Content Delivery Network. Now, what is Content Delivery Network? Is a distributed network of servers that can efficiently deliver web content to users. Now, when you are coding or you're programming your website, or you're typing your codes, you might need some things like icons, some resources from the web. You might not get it from your own end, but you could get it from a content delivery network. An example is the CDN.js. You have style sheets that have been written, plugins that have been written, things that have been written in JavaScript, fonts that have been written that you can just call from this CDN.js and then embed it in your own web page, and then you get those things like, let's say, a Facebook icon, a YouTube icon, a like icon, a thumb. So you don't need to create your own icon from scratch, you just get them from a content delivery network. Another one is the Azure CDN. And we also have Icons 8, we have Font Awesome, and a lot of them. So those are extra tools we can learn with web development as we proceed. Frameworks. What are frameworks? Building websites often include a bunch of repetitive tasks, and this is where frameworks and libraries come in. A framework or a library comes with a lot of codes that we can reuse, like classes, components, styles, etc. They help us get the job done and build our applications faster. Now, these days, different companies, they use different frameworks for different purposes, but it is necessary for one to know at least one framework. Examples of frameworks we have these days are React, Angular, Vue. Now, I said React, but technically React is not a framework, it's a JavaScript library. Just because we define framework as to something that helps us get our job faster. So React actually helps us build applications, single page applications faster. Now, other frameworks we have for the front end are Bootstrap 5, Tailwind CSS, Materialize, Bulma, and Foundation. We will look at this in depth as we move to the next slide. Now, CSS frameworks. CSS frameworks gives you the predefined classes or components you need to style element as fast as possible. They can rapidly speed up the process of creating layouts. But it is very important you learn CSS well before jumping into a framework. One of the most popular framework we have in CSS is the Bootstrap 5 framework. It's called Bootstrap, but the latest version is Bootstrap 5. It is very popular, it has many components, and it is known as a high-level framework, meaning that if I call a component, the component can have so many styles that are attached to it. For example, if I call a button and I give it a BG large or BG small, that button already contains some styles like padding, like outline, like even colors. The button has colors and the rest. So Bootstrap is a high-level CSS framework. But Tailwind CSS. Now, Tailwind CSS is another CSS framework that is popular, but is a low-level utility-based framework. What it means is that if you call a component or a class in Tailwind CSS, it will just do that one thing, unlike Bootstrap 5, which does many things as an high-level framework. We also have Materialized CSS framework. Materialize is based on material design pattern, so you have a pattern that is used to design or style elements. We have Bulma. Bulma is made to work with mobile first design. It's a modular framework. It is customizable. Foundation is also another advanced CSS framework, and it is very, very customizable. Those are the CSS frameworks we have, just to mention a few, but it's good one know how to use a framework, but know CSS very well before jumping into any framework. Now, user interface design principles. You might be asking, do I need to know about design principles? Yes, of course. As front-end developers and web designers, we should know some basic design principles. Now, how we use text on the web as we develop our website. When we mix colors, we want to make our text readable. Our text should at least be very readable when we're dealing with colors and constructs, so that readers and viewers and clients, when they go through our web pages, they'll be able to see the message. The message should be clear enough, not that the colors will overshadow the text and the text is not readable. No. Or when using background images, there is no overlay that darkens the image a little so that the text can come out. No, you must do something to make the text readable. So one thing is that every text should be readable. Another thing you must check is white spaces. White spaces between elements should not be too much and should not be too small, that the elements will be close together. No, we need to moderate our white spaces. So all these principles needs to get into the space, the knot in our head as we're learning web development. One thing is also scaling of our elements. We must know how to scale our web page by using relative element sizing like EM, REM, percentage, and view width, etc. We have different units of measurements in web development. We have the pixels, and we have so many of them in CSS, but it's good for we to use relative element sizing so that our fonts will not be too big, our text will not be too large, that it will cover the whole space. Our boxes, our containers will not be too close together, that there is no relative sizing. So it's needed for we to scale our elements properly. Now, visual hierarchy. We need to arrange elements in order of importance. It won't be nice when you have your heading at the bottom of the page. No, that's wrong. Your heading is supposed to be at the top of the page, and it won't be nice when you have more than one heading. You can have subheadings, but more than one heading on the page, you confuse the design. So it's good when we put our arrangement in order of importance. Now, the last one I want to talk about here is typography. It is okay when we use nice formatted fonts for our text, and also the font sizes. We need to check on that, and the typeface. We don't want to use fonts that will not be too readable, use fonts that are too big, the font size and the rest. So you need to moderate everything, know how to use font sizes and the rest. So these are some of the design principles every web developer must take note of as we're learning web development. Now, JavaScript. JavaScript is the language of the browser and is the third tool we use when learning front-end development. JavaScript is used to add functionality and interactivity to web pages in order to make it dynamic. Every web developer should at least know some level of JavaScript, should have knowledge of JavaScript. Now, the fundamentals you need to know about JavaScript are data types, how to work with the data types, the data structures in JavaScript, the arrays, the objects, and also functions, and also do repetitive tasks like using loops in JavaScript. And then after you've known those ones, you can now move into the document object model, where you know how to select elements on the DOM and then play with it and add event listeners and do something with each and every element on the DOM. And after knowing that, you should move into array methods. These are higher functions like map, reduce, filter, for each, for in. All of these things you need to know them. And one way to practice this is by learning algorithms, practicing algorithms. And after knowing all of this, you can still learn how to make requests to an API and also understand the HTTP very well, because HTTP is a protocol whereby things are being moved on the internet. It's a transfer protocol where requests are made, responses are gotten back. So it is needed for you as a web developer to know how requests and responses operate on the internet. Now, JavaScript has what they call asynchronous JS, where we do promises and async await. Now, these things are used to do more than one task at a time. We're waiting for a task to be completed, but as we're waiting, we are multitasking, doing another thing. So JavaScript has that ability to do that. It is called AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript. Now, we have some extra programming tools that are available for we as developers. Number one is the Git. Git is a popular version control system, and it is used with remote repositories such as GitHub, GitLab, Gitbucket. Now, Git is used to control or track our progress when we are developing websites, and is also used for collaboration. If I want to work with another developer remotely somewhere, I could tell him, okay, come on GitHub, this is my own username and ID, let us create a project, and then we start working. I can be doing a thing where in my location and he's working there in his own location. So it makes collaboration easy, and that's one thing every developer must know how to use. Another thing is the Node Package Manager. The Node Package Manager is used to install packages into your system, and the NPM, which is known as the Node Package Manager, requires Node.js to be installed. There are some libraries, there are some things you need while working your in a web page, while developing a web page, like let's say Sass and some other libraries, and then you need to know how to use the NPM to install them. So it's needed for extra programming things. Now, browsers might be asking, do I still need to know more about the browsers? Yes, because the Chrome browser have what they call Chrome Dev Tools, and is important for all types of developers, because you can select your element there, you can inspect your web page, you can test and troubleshoot and debug using the console, you can track down your network activity using the browser. So it's a good thing to study the browser and know how to use the dev tools that we have in the browser. We also have Emmet, Live Server, Prettier, ESLint, GitHub, Copilot. Now, Emmet comes with Visual Studio Code by default. It helps typing our codes, writing our code faster. Like, you don't have to type every single thing by yourself. As you just type a shortcut, maybe you want to get the paragraph, as you put P and you press tab, it will complete it for you. Now, Live Server is used to automate reloading of our web pages. So once I'm typing my web page, I don't have to always save and then go back to the browser and then press refresh or click on refresh. No, Live Server will do it for me. So Live Server is an extension in VS Code. You also have it in other IDEs and other text editors, but VS Code 2, which is a popular and most used text editor, we have Live Server there. We have Prettier. Prettier 2 is used to format our codes like Beautify will do. So these are plugins that helps. They are extra tools that helps when we are developing websites and makes our web development work faster. We want to look at deploying front end projects. When we build small projects, how do we deploy them? There are popular platforms that will help us, and there are domain name registers that we can use to register a domain name. Now, if you want to deploy a website, you must have a domain name. A domain name is the name that is given to your website where anyone can access. For example, facebook.com, that's a domain name for Facebook. It's like the address for Facebook. We have amazon.com, that's a domain name. So your website should have a name when you want to go live on the internet. And some of these popular platforms we have here is Netlify, we have cPanel, we have Amazon S3, we have Vercel. And Netlify is very popular and is used by front-end developers to put up few projects. As you just build a project, you can just push it to the internet using Netlify. cPanel 2 is good. You have file managers there. You're able to put in both your front end and your back end work using the cPanel. Vercel 2 is there, and then Amazon S3 is there. So for me to get domain name, there are some domain name registers that we can use to get domain name. We have Namecheap, we have GoDaddy, we have domain.com, we have Hostinger, and we have SmartWeb.com. SmartWeb is a Nigerian company, Nigerian IT solution company. So you go there, you buy a domain name. Usually you have domain name for a year, you have for, that's 12 months, you have for 24 months, you have for 3 years, and it's not too expensive. You can get a domain for as cheap as possible. So there are many ways to deploy to a hosting platform. Like I've said, we have Git. You can push your website through Git. We have the SSH, we have FTP. FTP, file transfer protocol, has been there for a long time and is very slow compared to what Git and SSH would do. So those are ways we can deploy our front-end projects to the internet. Now, a basic front-end developer. What are the functions of a basic front-end developer? What should a basic front-end developer do? Number one is that he or she will be creating website layouts using HTML and CSS and also JavaScript. So you always create website layouts, different website layout, and the rest using the basic tools available. Also, as a front-end developer, you must understand some design principles. Like we've said before, you have an eye for design. You should be able to understand some design principles that tend towards development. And then should know JavaScript and how to work with the DOM. Yes, you need to know how to work with the document object model, because when a request is made on the internet, that request, a server takes it and gives a response. So as the response is coming as an HTML document, which will be transferred to a document object model. So you need to know how to work with the DOM very well. Now you need to be able to create interactive front-end application. As a front-end developer, at least an application on the internet that is interactive using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you should be able to create that, and you should be able to connect to application interfaces, that's APIs, and make requests via fetch. You need to make requests and then connect to APIs. And one other thing that is very paramount and important is that front-end developers should be able to work with Git and use version control system. So you should be able to know how to use the version control system you're building to track your process when building websites and building web applications, and also to be able to collaborate with others so that others can work with you when they see your work and you push it into Git. Now the last is that a front-end developer should be able to deploy and manage small production projects. When you build your front-end web page, at least you should know how to deploy it to the internet, and you should know how to manage those small projects. These are the things a basic front-end developer should be able to do. 1, create website layout with HTML and CSS. 2, understand some basic design principles. 3, know JavaScript and how to work with the DOM. Number 4, create basic interactive front-end applications. 5, be able to connect to APIs and make requests with Fetch. 6, be able to work with Git and use version control systems aside Git also. And then the last one, should be able to deploy and manage small production projects. Those are the things that a front-end developer, a basic front-end developer, should be able to do. So we'll see you in the next video when we look at how the web works. Thank you.